Hi, my name is Noah Gift, and I'm here with two of the authors from the GPT-3 book. And we're going to be talking about some really interesting things today in terms of natural language processing. I'll let both of the authors introduce themselves. Go for it.
Hey everyone, my name is Shabam and I'm a developer relations specialist at Gina AI. And apart from that, I'm also a co-founder of Kairos Data Labs that I started with Sandra. And it covers everything that we are doing with the book. And the aim that we have there is to accelerate innovations at startups and companies with the coming of the age technologies like GP3 and Codex and how they can implement them within their product ecosystem.
Yeah, awesome intro. Thank you, Shabam, for spilling the beans on Kairos. So I'm Sandra. I'm ML Team's advocate at Neptune AI. I am co-authoring the O'Reilly GPT-3 manual book together with Shabam. The title is GPT-3 Building NLP Products with Large Language Models. We started working on it a little bit over 6 months ago, and we are just wrapping up. Very exciting journey. Thank you so much for inviting us here, and we're happy to talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, well, one question I think a lot of people always want to ask author is, why did you want to write a book? That might be a good place to start.
That's really a good question. And the story behind is like it didn't even started with a book, and we didn't thought of writing a book. So Sandra and me both were pretty active in the OpenAI community since the launch of GPT-3, since the launch of API itself in early 2020s. So we have been experimenting a lot. Sandra was creating some very cool videos. She was experimenting with a lot of use cases, and I was writing blogs, creating applications. And so one day, one of the editors from O'Reilly, she reads my blog and she thinks like it's something that is cool, that's coming of the age, and they should have something on that topic. So she reached out and asked like if you would be interested in writing a report. So that's how it started. And over months of conversation, it turned out that they would be more interested in putting it up as a book, and it has much to do with the technology itself, right? It's a revolutionary technology in itself. It's kind of paradigm shift that we are seeing, and it's revolutionary in terms of how it is democratizing the access to AI itself, right? GB3 is not just another language model. It is something that is actually inviting people from different backgrounds to come in and be the part of this AI revolution. You don't need a technical background anymore to use the cutting edge AI, to use state of the art AI, and to build applications out of that. I'll let Sandra speak more about that.
I guess I can hop in here because myself, I have no coding background. I'm a liberal arts major, and I actually wanted to be a writer, but more of a novelist when I was studying, but then decided that perhaps this is not a career to pursue because it's too, I don't know, emotionally challenging to be a writer. So I pushed it aside and pivoted to creating startup ecosystem around AI and AI trends. And this is when Shabam approached me, and I was in the middle of just like doing the research on GPT-3 and its potential business applications, testing different products that were built with it, talking to founders that have created something really cool with it. And so he approached me with the opportunity to write the report together on GPT-3, and then it turned into a book, and that's how we got here. Actually, we haven't even seen each other live ever. We were working on this book remotely completely for a couple of months, but Shabam is one of the people that I speak the most to during all this intense project. So we became friends very quickly. So it's a really cool sign of our times that we can, become collaborators on the book, working from different time zones, different parts of the world.
Wow, that is a really cool story. Yeah, I think that with books, that one way to think about them is that it's just a good collection of the work you're already doing, and it maybe even an excuse to maybe push yourself a little bit to to do something slightly different, or like it's almost like running a marathon. Like a lot of people at some point they're like, let's run a marathon, and you train for it, and then you run a marathon, and then it's like, oh, okay, I did that. That's pretty cool. But then the upside of it also for other people that read your book is that it really could be very helpful. And I agree with both of your points that what's happening with AI and ML right now is that there are many ways to use it. And I am also with you in terms of, I feel like the broad market is what I'm interested in with AI and ML, in terms of not necessarily, I mean, I write code every day myself, but I honestly am okay with if I never wrote code again, because I'm more about solving the problems. And I think there is a big opportunity for domain experts to use pre-trained models and just try to solve problems. And so I think that's very exciting about what your book is focused on.
Yeah. I think we both came to the conclusion that we are just scratching the surface at the moment and just like taking a picture of this moment in history while the revolution is just starting. But I think we will see many, many more use cases of GPT like models being introduced to everyday products that users can interact with, whether it's like chatbots, whether it's internet search. Like it will be much, much more common to have this, not necessarily this model, but other similar models as well as a backbone. So yeah, it's really interesting to observe it and see how especially startups experiment with it and try to find different problems that it can solve, and also what are the sort of problems with like building a startup around the model itself, because it's again a new thing to have a model as a service and have a company that takes care of all the hosting and everything. So it changes the dynamic quite a lot. So yeah, it's really enjoyable to experience it sort of firsthand, talking to founders.
So one thing that I've really been thinking a lot about is that uh, because I think like a programmer, I always use voice control now. Like I use voice control probably, I would say maybe 100 times a day, probably. I for everything, because I have voice control in my car, I have voice control in my house, I have voice control dictation for notes. I look for certain, you know, things, and I know some people are still slow to adopt some of the voice control because it's not there perfectly yet with many of the other devices. But what I suspect is that within, let's say, 5-10 years, we may hopefully actually much less use the screen where you see everybody in the street and they're just like glued to the phone and like putting themselves into danger. So in a way, it feels like we are actually right on the cusp of being able to use voice control in a way that could revolutionize, in fact, society. So is that something you're also seeing on your end, or do you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, we are already seeing it, and especially GPT-3, right? If we talk about that, because we have been researching a lot about that in our book. So if you see, like, it's not just voice control; it's about the entire world of virtual beings that it has created, right? Which is popularly known as metaverse these days. And there are companies like Synthesia who are allowing you to generate AI-based videos which look very similar to what is generated by a human being. So they let you avatarize yourself, and you can just create a video just by giving a text script, and the third party or the other person won't even realize the difference that this video is generated by AI. A lot of people actually get confused. Like we have run this experiment many times and saw like people are not even able to realize like if this video is generated. Let's say this podcast is happening, right? Even if we just give a text script and our avatars, this entire podcast can happen in real time, and people won't even know like if I am talking or my avatar is talking. So yeah, we are reaching there, and yeah, it's very amazing to see how these things are changing and how the dynamics are shifting.
Yeah, I guess I can comment also on like adding a little bit to what Shaban has said already. avatars is one thing, but I think when it comes to the voice command, the nice thing about it is that it makes makes the interaction with the computer more pleasant, sort of, and easier, more easygoing. You can just like casually talk to your Alexa or your car or whatever other devices that you're using. And we saw that with GPT-3, but I think we can see that even more with Codex, a descendant model of GPT-3 that OpenAI has recently launched, that it allows for many possible applications where it translates, it allows for marriage of natural language, human language, and code. And for many more applications where you will be able to just like directly talk to a given application and achieve some really cool result in the form of a code, for example. So I don't know, design games, for example, by talking to your computer. So I definitely see a future for this, and I don't think it's even such a far future. Already there are some like demos of apps being released where they allow you to code with just your voice. So it's a very exciting area that's evolving.
Yeah, I think that's another very interesting one too, where yeah, as you mentioned, the verbal commands to a program could be a very interesting way to write software, because I live at the beach part of the year, and so I like to take like a 2-hour walk or 4-hour walk, just relax, talk. But sometimes it would be nice to capture the time that I'm there, and I can imagine you're walking and you're just writing code, right? Or you can write books when you're walking, but the it seems like even there's so many interesting things about voice as well, that I really does feel like we're at the cusp of a new technology. I'll give you one other example. My I have two sons. I have a 15-year-old, and then I have a two. He's about to turn 2 in March, and my 15-year-old, when he was born, I remember the iPhone just was launched, and I remember kids get really upset when they're 1 or 2, and we're like, oh, just here's iPhone, just like like be quiet for a second, right? Because we're in a restaurant, and he just immediately just like learns it, and then it knows how to do all the voice control. And then my son, who is 2, he sees us talking to all of the smart devices, and we have the Nest hub, and I mean, I set like alarms, I ask for this, I'm like, I talk to it all day long. I'm just like, what about this, what about this? And so my son is just, he's watching, and I can see it's only a matter of time, maybe I would say like 6 months from now, where he's just going to start talking as well, and he's going to be talking to the device, and that opens up a whole other scenario, that because I think when you look at the mind of a child, that's when you see what's going to happen next. And it does feel like that he's very interested in voice communications with devices. Now, I don't know if
I guess like
Shaban, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess like that's very interesting point that you have brought. Like, if a child is conditioned like that, where he is brought up like from the very early stages, if he or she has seen something like that using voice control and using these kind of application, so now the normal question that comes up for them is like, this all this kind of stuff is very normal. Now what's next? So creativity automatically takes a boost there. It would be very interesting, very exciting to see what this new generation will come up with when they are already empowered with these kind of tools.
Yeah, I think we will just see this new generation of humans growing very accustomed to voice commands and also interacting very easily with all sorts of devices. And I guess it's natural. Like, for example, our generation interacts a little bit different with the computers than the generation from coming from the time of our grandparents, for example, right? Like, it's I think it's a natural progression, and we will see very different outcomes and modes of existing together with tech at kids especially. So I'm really jealous of your ability to observe it firsthand. I think child's brain, especially when it's developing, it's such a fascinating process.
Yeah, it is actually very interesting to see. I guess maybe I have more time to see this child develop, because also the world has changed. I mean, I was working for myself since about 2016, so I was a little before all of the complete remote work thing. But it's amazing when you actually have time to spend with your family and work with your family at the same time. Personally, I think it's a huge improvement of life. There was a I think there was a show on Apple TV I was watching last night called Severance. Have you heard of this show? Where the plot of the movie is that they basically isolate your work brain from your home home life, and in the two you essentially have two different consciousness, and one consciousness is trapped at work and another consciousness is at home. And it does, I think, if you think about the traditional workplace, which I'm not really an advocate of you live in a high cost city somewhere and you rent for your whole life, and then you do an hour and a half commute into work, then sit in a cubicle, then go to lunch with people. And so you're spending 12 hours a day, like in this other location, versus the world we're in now, where you can live anywhere, and we have the technology that you can do things asynchronously as well. It opens up a different pattern. I, I personally think the synchronous component of work is often the worst part, because you're forced to do things that just really are inefficient. But in an asynchronous distributed workforce, you have time to actually spend with your family, and I can observe my son and because I'm making trips downstairs. Oh look, and then I'm seeing what he's doing. It's just a different form of life. So that could be another very interesting thing that could happen as well, is that sometimes we randomly get things in life that change the world forever. And I think COVID will change the world forever, because it accelerated the remote work trend. And then we also have completely demystified the fact that you can work anywhere. I mean, we know that's works. And then now, if you couple that with some of these voice technologies, it's like, what could really happen? And could we live in a science fiction world in a very quick amount of time? Like, so that's what's kind of exciting, is maybe your book is really, the timing is right to be right on the cusp of a transitional phase of humanity. Just talking out loud.
Yeah, it's a big pot. It's a big pot to sort of process. But yeah, I definitely think that like one really exciting thing about GPT-3 and similar models is that it's extremely good at processing different kinds of texts and different types of styles of texts, and being able to emulate different styles and sort of get into interaction with humans in a specific desired style. So just loosely thinking about that, think how much more pleasant and rich can be our communication with any sort of devices if we just implement these powerful language models, powerful engines behind it. I think it's going to be much more fun. Simply, it will give devices more of a personality, and it will give us more fun to just hang out and interact with it. One example right now is Replica. I'm not sure if they are currently using GPT-3, but I know that they have, and they have experimented with it at least. And so Replica is this AI friend that tries to learn about you as much as possible through a chat app, and asks you all sorts of personal questions, remembers all sorts of facts that you share with it, and slowly grows to become like your confidant or your mentor or whatever type of relationship you're interested in. Yeah, and so when it was powered by GPT-3, you could really see how creative it was, and you could really see how people were surprised by the level of creativity, the level of sort of the human touch that they could get out of it. And there's still a big community using this app just because it's so fun and so sort of believable to actually use this chatbot as a personal friend. So yeah, it's just one example. I think we can give personality to many more spaces with the models.
And adding to your point, as you said, right, we are moving towards space where we can actually live in a sci-fi world, because we were talking about voice control, and GPT-3 actually goes a step beyond that, right? That's in voice control. With voice control, you can do all the mundane tasks with your voice. But with GPT-3, you can do some complex tasks as well just by using your voice. Let's say you want to write an email, you can just ask GPT-3 in a single sentence, and it can just send the email. Let's say I wake up one day at the morning and I want to remind Sandra about some of the chapters that we have to complete, and the deadline is approaching. I'll just ask my voice assistant, Alexa or Siri, just send an email to Sandra and remind her that these are the chapters, these are the things that we have to do, and it will properly create an email and send it to her. I mean, this is what we have currently now. Just think about what we can have in the near future with GPT-3 and possibly GPT-4 approaching near us. So the possibilities are immense, and the things that can happen is, again, like coming back to that point, we are just scratching the surface of it. We are not even going deep into what are the possibilities that it can have, because I guess few days back I guess you also have seen that tweet, right, by DeepMind, how they are using deep reinforcement learning for nuclear fission reaction. Even like these kind of applications that has potential to completely change the world, that's also happening with AI. So yeah, the possibilities are immense, and we are moving towards a future where convenience will be of utmost priority, and we can live in abundance actually with all these technologies backing us.
So with your book, yeah, what would be a good place for people that are both technical or non-technical to get started? Because again, I really like that approach where I know there's many people I work with in data science or machine learning or AI product management. That's another place I teach in, where some people, they don't want to be software engineers at all. So how would you explain to them how they could read your book and get started? And they may not even know what GPT-3 is. Do you have like a kind of a, we know nothing, how do we get started?
Right. That's a really interesting question, and that's what I get a lot. So if I have to explain someone or coming from a completely non-technical background about what our book is, I'll simply put it's a book on AI and creativity. It lets you combine artificial intelligence and lets you do creative things with it. You don't need a technical background or technical know-how to understand what this can do. And to put it simply, the vision that we have behind this book is how to reduce the friction between ideas and execution. So right now, let's say you have an idea that requires AI-based models. You need a technical know-how. You need to have that kind of background to build the application, to train the model, to deploy the model, and do all sort of things. But now with GPT-3, you just have a simple text out API. You just go to the playground. Now we don't have a waitlist even. You just log into OpenAI API, go to the playground, and just give model the instructions just like you give it to a human. Just tell the model, hey, I want to write an email. It will write an email. Hey, I want to create a chatbot. Will create a chatbot. And you can do all sort of things just by giving instructions to model in simple English language. It's as easy as possible. So yeah.
Yeah, so adding to that, we basically wrote the book having in mind that people with different backgrounds will be reading it, and that was our desired outcome. So anybody with any level of knowledge in the tech field can somehow find something valuable for themselves in the book. And we really try to both give a solid but very simple and clear introduction into what GPT-3 is, where it comes from, why is it a revolutionary step in the space. And then we look at different types of tasks that it can do. And then we talk to people that have already done something with it. So even if you're not a technical person, even if you're not interested in necessarily building something with it, you can have a nice overview of the A, where it comes from, and B, the ecosystem surrounding it. So what sort of or sorts of products are being built? What do these founders are discovering right now? What kind of use cases do they tackle? What does an investor think about this trend as a potential investment space? We talk to all sorts of ecosystem stakeholders. And also look at some controversies around it, some risks associated with it. So I think no matter what you're looking for, whether you're looking for like a practical guide into actually learning how to build with it, or just like getting a grasp of what it is, I think it's a really starting point, and that's how we wanted it to be.
And one thing, it sounds like both of you are interested in startups. I've worked in startups a lot of my life, and I've gotten a little bit away from them because for various reasons. I'm spending more time teaching, but the one issue that I have noticed in the Bay Area, living there for 10 years, is there seems to be like a culture of, I guess, libertarianism, which is I feel like is probably the best person who would be the poster child for libertarianism would be Peter Thiel, and you see he's now backing Trump candidates in the U.S. and he's very excited about all of this kind of stuff, and it seems like that's another really interesting thing we're going to have to address with startups is so my opinion is that we could do things where there's more of like an organic technology startup system versus regular. So like if you look at the food supply system, many people want to buy organic food because they don't want pesticides and like forced labor and or they want to buy fair trade food where people weren't paid unfair wages. That I think many consumers want to pay more money for having higher quality food, right? Or products like coffee. I know I do. I would much rather only work with companies that aren't necessarily libertarian. I feel like that's not my values. I want people to be treated fairly. I want stakeholders other than just the shareholders to be taken into account. Like, are we putting pollutants into the environment, or creating fossil fuels, all those kinds of things. So it feels like AI in particular. Excuse me one second. That AI in particular is really it's a very interesting space, because if we don't do it right, then unscrupulous people are going to own it, and then they're going to do what they just did, right? We just saw what happened with Facebook, Spotify. People just tell people not to take vaccines, make money off of it, create hoaxes, and there's no repercussions, really. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is one of the richest people on earth, and just no repercussions. He just did unscrupulous things. So with AI and ML in the startup space, do you think there is an opportunity for like a reset where there could be like a different set of values, where still, people are making money, they're creating products, but just like how there's two kinds of food at the grocery store, there's the food that's like, well, this might be full of poison. And then, and then there's other food. It's like, well, this actually probably isn't have poison. That do you think there could be a place, especially for things like GPT, where there's like an organic, tech startup for AI and ML?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, so if you see like responsible AI and safety is one of the burgeoning fields that we are seeing these days. And OpenAI itself too employs a lot of people just to take care of data privacy, data security, and safety side of things. And even if you go to the OpenAI documentation, there's a list of things that you need to go through before you put your application before your application go live. You have to follow certain set of guidelines, and it shouldn't do any harm. It shouldn't have a text of violence. It shouldn't create any hatred, and all these things. Like these are just the number of things that's on top of my head. But there is a set of guidelines that they have that they follow. There's proper terms of use documentations, and we do even touch all of these in our book as well, and try to convey it in the form of case studies, right? The products that I've built and how they need to be within these guidelines when you build something with GPT-3. And that's one of the most interesting thing that we saw with OpenAI. They are from the very early stage, from the inception, they are very concerned about AI safety and responsible AI. And many of the startups that are coming off these days, they are especially particular about these things on how to keep it safe, how to keep the data private, secure, and it shouldn't be like that anybody and everybody can access the data of one client, and it shouldn't leak here and there. So yeah, it's a burgeoning field, and it's a growing topic. It's a growing interest, but right now what I see where we are is it's still in the development phase. People don't still realize that difference which you can spot in food, right? You can spot like this is an organic food and this is a normal food, and this is the one that I should buy. So that kind of interest, it will still take some time for people to understand about responsible AI and AI safety and why these are important. It exists and it's growing, but still we it will take few more years for people to completely understand what this actually means and the kind of impact it can have in the long term future.
Yeah, I would add to that it's quite heartwarming to observe all the initiatives OpenAI has already taken in order to make their models as safe, as toxic less, as equality driven as possible. The thing is that once the transformers have been born, we haven't really understood how they are working. We haven't really understood what are the potential downsides of these models. We haven't understood how to curate data sets so that they aren't skewed, to begin with, because the problem starts with the data sets oftentimes. And we are discovering it now. And OpenAI introduced a number of mechanisms that allowed them to test and see what are the potential problems and then address them. So first of all, they introduced the beta, so only invited people could access the platform. They are also creating guidelines for what kind of uses are allowed with this technology, and then they are also monitoring whether that's actually the case and whether the end users don't abuse certain applications, for example. So there are all sorts of mechanisms on all these levels to make sure that these models are as safe as possible. Having said that, this is, just like Shaba mentioned, work in progress, and we have many more problems to solve, but it's really interesting to see that sort of all this backlash coming from the tech field generally is informing the leaders in this field to do better and to actually take precautions before they even launch products and before they give it to the world. So yeah, I would say we are in this space, we are much smarter thanks to that. We learn from the experience.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about this a lot in the last several years, that the way I could break down the ethical framework is that there are essentially three types of things that you could describe for a company. A company is either positive, neutral, or negative in terms of their impact on humans. And so I would call this, are you harming humans at scale? So if we look at, for example, Facebook is a great example. they propagated the Sandy Hook hoax for, I think, close to a decade. So parents who their kids were murdered, Facebook was monetizing the harassment of the parents. That's to me, that's harming humans at scale, right? That's a very easy example, right? Or the Spotify is another good example. They have Joe Rogan amongst other people telling people. I mean, I watched the episode, like, kids shouldn't get vaccines. Like, well, you're harming humans at scale, right? Like, very simple, and you're monetizing it. So it feels like that's so simple to just break down as an ethical framework. Do you harm humans at scale? Yes or no? So Spotify, Facebook, yes, right? And then there's neutral, like Disney Channel. Like, well, is it helpful to watch Star Wars or Boba Fett or Mandalorian? Like, it's neutral, right? Neutral. And then you have positive, where there are companies that are really, helping humanity, and they're doing good stuff, and they're still profitable. I think a good example would be Patagonia, where the core values of the company is that they want to make sustainable products and all. So that's kind of where I'm getting at, is that it seems, in my opinion, so simple for AI companies to be very, very specific. It's not complicated. Do you harm humans at scale? They could say that. They could say, like, our AI products do not harm humans at scale. They could just be neutral. Say, we don't hurt people. We don't make money off of hurting people, right? And that would be, I think, for startups, that's one of the things I'm trying to evangelize is that you'll make way more money by telling people, I don't harm humans at scale. So hopefully with the GPT-3 and all the stuff that's happening, there'll be some startups to say, no, we're going to be very specific about this. We're helping humanity. We and I think another one is that's kind of a dicey one is I was at Tesla. They invited me over a few months ago to go to Palo Alto, and on one hand, I think it's amazing some of the technology they created with. I have their, like, battery backup system, which is pretty cool, and I like that their cars, are like have lots of range, and they're clean energy. But then it's like, oh, you had to let me down. Like, you could say, if pedestrians are walking across the street and they didn't sign a release to say, I'm part of your autonomous driving test, aren't you harming humans at scale? Like, I think you are. Like, I mean, you like, that unfortunately fails the test for me. So it feels like we're really at this phase now with where that's one of the things that I'm trying to promote, is that it feels like many customers would love to spend more money for a product, and because they would feel good about the AI product that they're buying. So I don't know. That's my thought on the ethics of it.
Like, one thing I can think of is that it is a little bit challenging to be good, non-harming, contributing to the benefit of humanity from the get-go if you don't exactly know what this technology is capable of, and sort of where its edges, where it's safe. And I think at the beginning with GPT-3, there were lots of tests being done in order to find out, like, how people interact with it, what sort of outputs this model generates, why does it generate certain outputs, why does it tend to be more misogynistic than you would like it to be, and how to fix it. So we had to go through certain steps in order to be able to say, okay, this model is now safe in order to be released into the public space. And I think another part is that you also need to, while you're developing something, you need to give it a go and see how it will actually interact with the real world. And sometimes you cannot predict that. So I'm not sure what's Tesla's case, but I'm sure that it's really different to, for example, train a computer vision algorithm to watch out for pedestrians, and very different to actually have it run in the real world, and how this data differs, and how it informs the decision making of the software. So yeah, I mean, there is this tension that on the one hand you want to keep it as safe as possible, but on the other you also need to let it run for a while and observe how it behaves and then learn from it. So yeah, it's a challenge to figure out a good balance between these things. But I very much agree
Well,
with you as well.
well, I would say in all of these situations that I also am a huge fan of, moving fast and all that stuff. But let's take Tesla for example, because when I was with Tesla, I actually told this to the engineers. I said, what if you just had a new road? What if you just build a road that's just for Teslas? Right, like that you could solve you could essentially eliminate the risk to people that didn't sign up to be a part of the experiment, right? Like, so it isn't like it's not possible to have an autonomous vehicle that would eliminate the externality of the pedestrians or the other vehicles. You could do it because they could build their own private highway, and the private highway would only have Teslas on it, only people that agreed to do Tesla. Now, would that be more expensive? Yes, it would. Would your product be slightly less compelling? It would. So I think that's a good example, and I think the same with if you look at companies like Facebook or let's take Facebook for example. It's like, oh, we can't stop misinformation. Well, you could. Just people can't create comments. People can't post content to Facebook anymore. That's it, right? It just turns off. No content can be created, and maybe there's like some huge vetting process where there's like, it takes like 6 months to get vetted, and then there's rules. You could do this, right? You could stop all misinformation on Facebook. Now, how much less money would they make? But if Facebook, instead of being a $500 billion company, maybe they're 5 billion. Well, the world would be better, but then one person who just bought a third of Kauai maybe can't buy a third of Kauai. Maybe he can only buy like a house on Kauai. So I think that's the real interesting thing is that in my opinion, there always is a way that you can have a profitable company, especially if you say that the growth and user retention and all this isn't the number one priority. You could say we want to create a profitable company. We're okay with growing slower because we respect so much, humans help not harming humans at scale. So I hope that the AI people are really thinking about this.
Yeah, so like one example that we have is AI Dungeon in case of GPT-3. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story, but basically AI Dungeon is this RPG character game where it uses GPT-3 to generate text-based adventure games, and you're able to create all sorts of characters, all sorts of environments, and just like play with text. So awesome use case, very creative, and people use it for all sorts of reasons. But then what happened a little bit like few months into the launch of the company was that they discovered that a lot of the users are actually using this game for creating pornographic content, and the one that's not ethical. And OpenAI very quickly reacted because they were able to also observe it and just required this specific use case to be completely to not be possible with introducing lots of filters and just observing how users interact with the app on a daily basis. And yeah, I guess it's one of these stories where again, like you need to let it out in order to see how people interact with it, but then once you observe something that's concerning, you actually make a stand and decide that, okay, this is where the line is, and we don't care about monetization, we care about the better world.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
And adding to what Sandra just said, right, with large language models like GPT-3, the thing is we still don't completely understand how these models actually work. Let's say if you give a certain input, the output you're gonna get will change dynamically over time. With a little bit difference in input, you'll get a completely different output. And that's what happened with AI Dungeon. So it started on a positive note, and then people tried giving different input prompts, and it opened a completely different world. It generated completely random sort of things, and then it evolved into a different use case altogether. So the thing with these models is you cannot predict what it can do because the possibilities are endless. So it's very hard to restrict it from doing harm, or from like putting a proper filter to it, or putting a proper measure that you can like stop it consistently, stop people from doing any bad activities or doing any harm. But OpenAI did came up with a content filtering model after all these use cases, which actually avoids generating harmful content. And even if it generates harmful content, even if it's not a harmful content, it has some words to it that indicates it might be harmful. You'll get a warning in the playground itself or in the API output itself, like this is a harmful content. You should be aware before reading it. So I personally am very impressed by the efforts they put. They didn't have to put this content filtering model. It doesn't add anything to the output of GPT or to the capabilities of GPT-3. It's just a extra added feature just to ensure AI safety and response towards responsible AI. So that's a really commendable step from OpenAI. But again, like going back, we need to propagate the subject of AI ethics and responsible AI to the people who are using it, to the startups who are building the product, because OpenAI can control it to a certain extent, right? At the end, it's all about the end user, how they want to use it, and what are the kind of inputs they give to the model. Because the model in itself is so big, so powerful, and trained over such a large data set, it can just mix up anything and everything and can come up with all sort of outputs. So it's the basic responsibility of the people that are using it, as you correctly mentioned, right? You need to be ethically responsible while you're building something with GPT-3 or any kind of language model, because it doesn't impact the current society that we live in. It will have a much longer impact, a long lasting results or long lasting impact that will necessarily affect generations. What you build today or the standards that you set today is going to affect much longer in the future. So it's high time that we start thinking about these issues and set up proper structure. And OpenAI has taken step in that direction. So if you see all the other alternatives of GPT-3 like Cohere and Eleuther, they follow the same steps, right? They introduce the same terms of service, they introduce the same guidelines. They have to follow because OpenAI has already set up that standard. You cannot just go ahead and just open everything up. And now data privacy, data security, AI ethics have become a norm because these people have already introduced it. So all the other products, other alternative models that's coming after that, they're already following it. And it's really good to see that we are moving towards a society where people are more conscious about how they use these kind of models. These aren't just AI models that you can use for any kind of product, but they are more conscious about how they're using it and the kind of output it generates and the impact that it will have in the society.
Yeah, that's good to hear. That gives me some reassurances for, because it feels so simple in some ways, where if we it's true that you can't always anticipate all of the uses of a technology like dynamite. I think was a good example, right? Was it Alfred Nobel that created the first dynamite stick, and then he felt bad about it, so he created the Nobel Prize. Same with Einstein and others' research on the atoms and the harnessing the power of atoms, and then it's like, whoa, wait, why are we creating bombs? So there are situations like that, but as long as the people that are the smart people that are involved in it, like you two and other people who are like the thought leaders, are able to adapt and say, hey, we're not okay with this. This is not what you do, and you adjust to it. It seems like all of these bad tech companies, they could have just adjusted, right? They could have just said, listen, we're not going to do this. This is hurting people. We're not going to let you put hoaxes on Facebook. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. We won't do it. But so I think that's really the trick. Is it seems like it's just it's the values of the thought leaders and the tech leaders and the startup leaders. Either they believe in this and they want to make the world a better place, or they don't. And you and that's kind of what kind of world do we live in? Do we live in a bad world, or do we live in a world where like a good science fiction world where there's all these really awesome things happening and humanity's able to use things like GPT-3?
I guess like it's all about what you set up as a norm, right? Because good and bad is always the same side of a coin. And with innovation, the good will happen, and in the same way, it will also invite the bad things. Then you have to understand, right, which direction you want to go to. Even as a company, like OpenAI or Luther or Cohere, who are developing these kind of models, it's also their responsibility. It's also their moral, ethical responsibility to set up these kind of guidelines, to set up these kind of structure, that the people who are going to use their products are more conscious about how they are going to use it, to set up a norm, how it looks like, a norm for AI ethics, a norm for responsible AI, a norm where using these models for bad purposes is not accepted at all. So that's the kind of society or world we should strive towards building, and we should aim for building, because we have learned a lot from these past experiences, right? We have been talking about all the mess that has happened with the big tech, Facebooks of the world, and all these things. Because technology in itself is so attractive that the bad use cases automatically propel, and it's very easy to it's very easy to get to them, right? The good always comes later. The bad use cases comes up very easily, and it's very easy to come up with those. So it's our moral responsibility, as well as the responsibility of the people who are inventing or creating these kind of products.
Yeah, I would also add a little bit about like the responsibility of a user, because in the case of AI Dungeon, for example, like the founders in their use case, that's like super creative storytelling type of game use case, and like they wouldn't really encourage any sort of child pornography imagery on their platform. They wouldn't really that wasn't absolutely where they wanted to go with the platform. But then the users were able to interact freely with the model, and they took it in that dark corner. So it's also about it's a reflection of us humans, and like how we interact with this tech, and what kind of moral values we hold when we do it. Maybe we should start thinking more in terms of sort of etiquette in etiquette and like moral compass in interactions with AI, rather than just like use it as a sort of dark internet corner where you can just like dump all sorts of things to it, and then expect a good outcome. I mean, it won't happen for sure. So it's also on us people that are interacting with these products to actually want to have a nicer, better world without any sort of things like what happened with a dungeon.
Great. Well, I think that's a great segue for maybe just talking a little bit more about your book in terms of like when can people buy the book? It sounds like I think many people would want to buy your book. When is it going to be released?
So we are planning for the release end of May. We are already wrapping up writing the very, very last sub-chapters, and now are working intensely with the editor, trying to save as much of the book as possible. And it will be available on O'Reilly platform, but it will be also in the book form. So you will be able to, I think you can already like pre-purchase it on all sorts of bookstores, Amazon, etc.
So basically, the people, if they have subscription to O'Reilly, can read, I think, at least 3 chapters, right? The era of large language models using the OpenAI API, and then also programming with GPT-3. Right? I think those are the 3 chapters. And then if they want to pre-order, they can pre-order now. And actually, if you are interested in this topic, it probably is a good idea to pre-order sooner than later. I've noticed that books I've written, sometimes especially with the way the world is right now with shortages of supply chain, that it's better to be in the front of the queue so that you can get the book as quick as possible. So that might be something that people would want to consider is pre-order sooner than later, so that you don't have to wait an extra month to get the book.
Yeah, we also invite you to follow our YouTube channel, Kairos Data Labs, because we are releasing some resources before even the book will be fully published. such as interviews with the AI ecosystem. As I mentioned, we're introducing quite some interviews, so we will be publishing it there. And we also have some additional learning materials for people that want to start, building apps with GPT-3, or just like creating their own sort of relationship and like educational path with them. So yeah, check it out.
Cool. Yeah. So the YouTube channel, is there? I guess you can post that in. I guess say it one more time, so people know what it is. What is it called again?
It's called Kairos Data Labs, the channel.
Kairos Data Lab.
Yeah, and we can send you a link after our conversation, so you can add it to the call.
Perfect. In any other place that people can reach you, LinkedIn, websites?
Yeah, they can reach us out on Twitter and LinkedIn. We are pretty active there, and we are always putting some snippets, threads out there on Twitter from the book, and talking all things about GPT-3, no code, and this versioning ecosystem, as well as they can follow us on LinkedIn as well. And we also have a Kairos page on LinkedIn where we put in all these updates, some interesting insights that we come up with, and all the new things that we are doing in the book.
Great. Well,
yes, I'll add to that Shofam is also a really good author of a Medium blog, so you can follow him there for more content on AI. And I myself have a YouTube channel exploring different types of AI trends as well, so you can check me out there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I think many people are going to be interested in your content, and I think also it's just good to have a conversation with you and find out some of your ideas about what's going to happen in the future. And on my end, I really learned a lot and appreciated your time talking with me, and very excited to get a copy of your book. I'll definitely be ordering a copy.
Thanks so much for having us. It was a big pleasure to talk a little bit about it, even if it's still in the making. So thanks a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay.